The sun of the abandoned planet burned hot in the sky, its light harsh and unkind. Beneath it, a small, weak figure moved slowly across the barren land. It was an alien dragon, once a mighty and feared creature, but now little more than a shadow of its former self. Its scales were dull, the bright green once covering its body now faded to a pale yellow. Its wings, once strong and capable of soaring through the skies, were tattered and broken. The dragon was starving, its stomach empty and aching for food, but the planet had nothing to offer. This was not the place the dragon had chosen. It had been punished here. A cruel punishment. The aliens who had once called the dragon a hero, a creature of power, had turned on it. They were the ones who had abandoned it here, on this dead world. They were the ones who had sentenced it to live alone, to die alone, and now it was paying the price. Once, the dragon had been the protector of a vast and powerful empire. Its fiery breath had struck fear into the hearts of enemies, and its strength had been unmatched. But something had changed. The dragon had made a mistake that the aliens could not forgive. It had refused to follow orders. It had questioned the alien leaders, something that no one, not even the mightiest of creatures, was allowed to do. In their eyes, that was the ultimate crime. The dragon had been captured and brought here, to this desolate planet. The aliens had left it here with no resources, no shelter, and no hope of survival. They had given it a slow, painful death sentence. They had believed it would not last long, that it would die alone and forgotten, just another broken creature in the galaxy. But the dragon refused to die. Day after day, it dragged its tired body across the dry, cracked ground. It searched for food, but the planet was empty, the land barren. There were no animals to hunt, no plants to eat. The dragon's wings, once strong enough to carry it across the skies, were too weak to fly. It could only walk, slowly and painfully, its claws dragging against the dirt as it moved. The heat of the sun made it harder to keep going. The dragon's breath was shallow, its movements slow and stiff. Each step felt heavier than the last. Its once glowing eyes were dim, clouded by hunger and exhaustion. The planet seemed to stretch on forever, endless and empty. There was no sign of life anywhere. The dragon wondered how long it could survive here. Would it be days, weeks, months, or would it simply collapse one day, unable to continue? Still, the dragon did not give up. It remembered the strength it once had, the power that had made it feared across the galaxy. It held onto that memory, clinging to it like a lifeline. Even though its body was weak, its spirit refused to break. It would survive, no matter how hard it was. It had to. As the days passed, the dragon began to feel its strength slip away. It could feel its body growing weaker, its movements slower. The hunger gnawed at its insides, and the thirst burned in its throat. But still, it kept moving. It refused to stop. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the dragon found a small patch of water. It wasn't much, just a small, dirty pool, but it was enough. The dragon lowered its head, its dry mouth lapping at the water, drinking in small, desperate sips. It was the first drink it had had in days. For a moment, it felt a little better, but the relief was short-lived. The alien planet had nothing else to offer. The water was bitter, the land dry and lifeless. The dragon lay down on the cold ground, its body aching and sore. It closed its eyes for a moment, but sleep did not come. Every time it closed its eyes, it saw the faces of the aliens, the ones who had turned their backs on it. It remembered the day they had abandoned it, the day they had left it here to die. The dragon shook its head, trying to shake off the memories. There was no point in thinking about the past. It had to focus on surviving. It had to find a way to escape this planet, to prove to the aliens that they had made a mistake. But how? As it lay there, struggling to stay awake, The dragon heard a sound. It was faint, almost like a whisper on the wind. It was something the dragon had not heard in a long time. The sound of a ship. The dragon lifted its head, its tired eyes scanning the sky. There, in the distance, it saw something. A small, dark shape moving against the backdrop of the red sky. The dragon's heart raced. Could it be? Was someone coming? The dragon pushed itself to its feet, using every last bit of strength it had left. It had to see who it was. It had to find out if there was hope, if there was someone who could help. The ship grew closer, and the dragon's heart beat faster. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the chance it had been waiting for. The dragon's breath was shallow as it stood at the edge of the barren land, watching the ship draw closer. Its wings, once mighty and powerful, hung limply at its sides. It was still weak, but something deep inside it stirred, a flicker of hope. The dragon had spent so many days alone, without food, without help. It had almost given up. But now, a chance had appeared. It took a few slow steps forward, its claws scraping against the dry earth, each movement heavier than the last. The pain in its body was unbearable, but it pushed forward. Its heart beat faster, and its senses sharpened. The ship was getting closer, and the dragon could feel the excitement building. The ship landed with a soft thud, kicking up a cloud of dust. The dragon watched intently, its eyes narrowed, trying to make out what was happening. The doors of the ship opened with a loud hiss, and a figure stepped out. It was a human, a foreman dressed in simple but sturdy clothes. The human looked around the empty planet, seemingly unaware of the dragon watching from a distance. The dragon's heart skipped a beat. Could this human be the one to help? The human didn't seem afraid, but there was a quiet confidence in the way they moved. The dragon tried to move closer, but the pain in its legs made it slow. It stumbled once, then twice, before finally reaching a large rock for support. Its breath was ragged, and it could feel its strength slipping away with every second. The foreman, still unaware of the dragon's presence, began to take readings on his equipment. He wasn't looking for anything unusual, just scanning the environment to see if there were any resources on the planet. The dragon watched, its eyes following every movement of the human. Its body felt weak, but its mind was alert. This human was the only chance it had. The dragon wanted to roar, to make its presence known, but it didn't have the strength. Instead, it took another slow step forward, dragging its exhausted body toward the foreman. Every step was a struggle, but the dragon refused to give up. It had fought too hard to survive just to give in now. It had to make contact. It had to show the human that it was alive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the dragon managed to stagger forward, its claws scraping against the rough ground. The foreman looked up, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw the creature before him. The dragon could feel the tension in the air, could sense the human surprise. For a moment, neither of them moved. The foreman stared at the dragon, his face a mix of curiosity and disbelief. The dragon's heart pounded in its chest. It wanted to speak, to tell the human that it was not a monster, that it was not just some wild creature. It wanted to say that it was a living being, that it deserved a chance to survive. But there were no words. The only sound that came from the dragon was a low, weak growl. The foreman took a step back, but instead of retreating, he took another step forward. He moved carefully, slowly, as if testing the dragon's response. The dragon's eyes locked onto the human's, and for a brief moment, it felt a strange sense of trust. This human was not afraid. This human was not like the aliens who had abandoned it. The foreman reached into his pack and pulled out a small ration of food, something basic that he had brought for himself. He held it out in front of him, as if offering it to the dragon. The creature's nose twitched, and it sniffed the air. The smell of food made the dragon's stomach twist with hunger. It had not eaten properly in so long, and the thought of food was almost too much to bear. The dragon stepped forward, its claws clicking against the ground as it moved toward the human. Its body ached with every movement, but the hunger was stronger. It stretched out its neck and sniffed the food, feeling a wave of desperation wash over it. The foreman didn't pull away, instead holding the food steady. Slowly, the dragon's tongue flicked out, tasting the food. It was the first real meal it had had in days. The dragon ate quickly, devouring the ration in a few swift motions. Its hunger was insatiable, but for the first time in what felt like forever, the dragon felt a little better. It could feel the strength returning to its body, bit by bit. The foreman watched, but he didn't seem afraid. He simply stood there, observing the dragon as it ate. The creature was still weak, still broken, but there was something in its eyes that made the foreman believe it could survive. When the dragon finished eating, it stepped back, a low rumble coming from its throat. The foreman watched carefully. But instead of fear, there was something else in his eyes. Curiosity, and maybe even a little respect. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. The dragon could see the decision forming in the human's mind. This was not just a creature to be feared. This was a creature that could be helped. The dragon's heart swelled with hope. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for it to survive. Maybe this human would be the one to save it. And in that moment, the dragon knew one thing for sure. It wasn't going to give up now. It had found a chance, a lifeline. It would fight for its survival. The planet's sky was a dusty red, and the wind blew the dry earth into swirling clouds. The dragon watched as the human moved across the barren land, his boots crunching against the dry ground. The foreman was focused on his equipment, checking readings, marking points on his map, but the dragon could not take its eyes off him. This human was something different. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation. He was just calm. The dragon's body was weak, but it had gathered all its remaining strength. It had to make sure the human noticed it. This could be its only chance for survival. The dragon shuffled forward, moving slowly, its claws scraping the earth. Each step was painful, its muscles stiff from the cold and hunger. The planet had drained it of everything. But it could not stop now. The foreman didn't notice the dragon at first. He was busy with his tools, his attention fixed on the scans and measurements. But then, just as the dragon took another step, the wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of the dragon's presence. The human turned, his eyes wide with shock. He froze for a moment, staring at the creature before him. The dragon stood tall, despite its small size now, its body covered in dirty, ragged scales. It was a pitiful sight, but its eyes were full of something else, a strange hope. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The dragon's heart raced. Would the human run away? Would he try to fight? The dragon knew it was weak, no longer the powerful beast it had once been. But the human did not run. He simply watched, his face a mix of curiosity and confusion. The dragon took a slow step forward, trying to close the distance. Its breath was shallow, but it was determined. If it could, just get close enough, maybe it could show the human that it was not a monster, that it was not some wild, dangerous creature to be feared. The foreman took a step back, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon at his side. But he didn't draw it. He didn't point it at the dragon. Instead, he just stood there, observing. The dragon could see the hesitation in the human's eyes. He was unsure, not of the dragon's strength, but of its intentions. The dragon made a low, weak sound, almost like a growl, but it was more of a plea. It wasn't a sound of aggression, but of exhaustion. It was trying to communicate, trying to say that it needed help. It had never had to beg before, but now it had no choice. Its voice was barely audible, and its eyes shone with something almost human. Desperation. The foreman seemed to understand. Slowly, he lowered his hand from the weapon and took a cautious step forward. He didn't speak, but his actions were clear. He wasn't scared. He wasn't treating the dragon like a threat. He was treating it like a living being. The human reached into his bag, pulling out a small packet of food. He didn't make any sudden moves, just slowly extended the food toward the dragon. The dragon's nose twitched, and it took a cautious step forward. Its body was starved, aching for the food, but it was still wary. The human could easily turn on it. But the kindness in the human's eyes made the dragon feel safe, in a way it hadn't felt in a long time. The dragon sniffed the food, its mouth watering at the smell. It was something simple, just a ration bar. But to the dragon, it felt like a feast. Slowly, the dragon lowered its head, stretching its neck to reach the food. Its movements were slow, weak, but it was careful not to frighten the human. It bit into the ration, the taste almost too much to handle after so long without food. The dragon devoured it quickly, its hunger burning in its stomach. The foreman watched silently, observing the dragon's every movement. When the dragon finished, it lifted its head and looked at him. There was something in its eyes now, something more than just hunger or desperation. There was gratitude. The foreman didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, staring at the dragon, his face unreadable. But then, he reached into his bag again and pulled out another ration. He offered it to the dragon, without a second thought. This time, the dragon took the food more slowly, savoring the taste. Once the dragon had eaten its fill, it stepped back, its body still weak, but feeling a little stronger. The foreman continued to watch, but now there was a soft curiosity in his gaze. He didn't treat the dragon like an enemy anymore. He treated it like a creature in need of help. The dragon, still breathing heavily, finally looked away from the foreman and scanned the surroundings. The barren planet stretched endlessly in every direction. There was no sign of life, no hope of escape. But at least, for now, it had found someone who cared. Someone who saw the dragon for what it truly was. A survivor. The human slowly turned, back to his ship, picking up his equipment, as if he had made his decision. He wasn't in a hurry, but the dragon could tell he was preparing to leave. The dragon's heart sank a little, fear creeping in again. Would the human just leave? The way the aliens had? But the foreman paused, turning back to look at the dragon once more. "Stay here," the human said, his voice calm and steady. "I'll be back." And then he turned and walked back to his ship, leaving the dragon standing there. For a moment, the dragon didn't move, unsure of what to do. But then, something inside it shifted. This human had not turned away. He had not abandoned it. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for the dragon to survive. The dragon stood where the foreman had left it, its body still aching from hunger and exhaustion. It felt weaker with every passing minute. The barren land stretched out endlessly, around it, the dust swirling in the dry wind. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the planet's surface. The dragon's thoughts were clouded, its body drained, but it refused to give up. It had a small spark of hope now. The foreman had promised he would return. The dragon waited patiently, its large golden eyes scanning the horizon. Hours passed, but the foreman did not return. The dragon's stomach rumbled, and it lay down on the cold ground, trying to conserve energy. It didn't know how long it could last, but it had to believe that the human would keep his word. Just as the dragon began to drift into a light sleep, it heard the hum of the foreman's ship. Its head snapped up, and its heart leapt in its chest. The ship was coming back. The human was returning. The ship landed smoothly, dust rising in the air. The foreman stepped out, carrying something in his hands. It was a large bag, filled with supplies. The dragon's eyes brightened, and it pushed itself to its feet. Every movement was painful, but it was excited. The food, the help, it was all here. The foreman didn't waste any time. He walked straight to the dragon, his face serious but kind. Without saying a word, he knelt down and opened the bag, pulling out several large ration packs and some medical supplies. The dragon watched closely, its eyes wide. It could smell the food, and its stomach growled louder than before. The foreman didn't offer the food right away. Instead, he took a moment to examine the dragon closely. He could see how weak the creature was, how every muscle in its body seemed to be trembling. The dragon looked at him with a strange mixture of trust and fear. It had never trusted anyone so easily before, but something about the foreman felt different. "Easy," the human said softly, his voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon didn't respond, but it did take a small step forward. The foreman nodded and carefully tore open one of the ration packs. He held it out, waiting for the dragon to approach. The dragon sniffed the air and then slowly, carefully, took the food. It was hesitant at first, unsure if it could trust the human fully. But as it tasted the food, its body seemed to react instantly. The hunger that had gnawed at it for so long began to ease, and the dragon took more, eating quickly. The foreman watched silently, making sure the dragon was okay. It was clear to him that the creature had been starving for days, maybe longer. He didn't rush it, allowing the dragon to eat at its own pace. Once the dragon had eaten its fill, the foreman moved on to the next part of his plan. He pulled out some medical supplies, bandages, antiseptic, and a few tools. The dragon's scales were rough and torn in several places, bruised from the struggle it had endured. There was a deep cut along its side, where the sharp rocks had scraped its skin. The foreman knew he had to take care of these injuries if the dragon was going to survive. "Hold still," the foreman said gently as he approached the dragon. His hands were steady, though he knew this could be dangerous. The dragon was weak, but it was still an alien creature, and he had no idea how it would react to being touched. But the dragon seemed to sense that the human wanted to help. It didn't flinch or pull away as the foreman carefully cleaned the wound along its side. The foreman worked carefully, taking his time to make sure the dragon was comfortable. He spoke softly to it as he worked, his words calming and gentle. The dragon's body was stiff, and every touch seemed to cause it pain, but it didn't resist. It trusted the human now. Once the dragon's wounds were bandaged, the foreman stood back and took a long look at the creature. He could see the change in it already. It was still weak, but there was a spark of life in its eyes again. The food had restored some of its energy, and the care had helped soothe its pain. It was not much, but it was enough. The foreman sat down on a rock, watching the dragon rest. He didn't rush the creature. There was no need. The dragon had been through so much, and it needed time to heal. He opened his own ration pack and ate slowly, thinking about what came next. He couldn't stay here forever. He had to finish his mission on this planet. But the dragon had a life worth saving. After a while, the dragon slowly got to its feet, testing its strength. It moved awkwardly at first, but then, to the foreman's surprise, it stretched out its wings. They were still weak, the membranes torn and battered, but the dragon was trying. It was trying to reclaim a part of itself, and that gave the foreman hope. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" the foreman said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. The dragon didn't respond, but it didn't need to. Its actions spoke, louder than words. It had been abandoned, broken, but now, with the help of this human, it was beginning to heal. The foreman knew there was still a long way to go, but at least for now, they were on the right path. He stood up and wiped his hands on his pants, glancing at the horizon. "We'll get you back on your feet, I promise," he said, more to himself than to the dragon. It was going to take time. It was going to be hard. But together, they had a chance. The days passed slowly, one blending into the next. As the dragon began to recover, the human had stayed with it, helping it every step of the way. He brought food, water, and even more medical supplies. He worked tirelessly to help the dragon regain its strength. But despite the human's care, the dragon still felt weak. Its wings could barely move, and its body was still covered in scars from its long time on the abandoned planet. But every day the dragon grew stronger. It began to walk longer distances, its legs becoming less shaky. It practiced stretching its wings, even though they still hurt. The foreman was always there, watching over the creature, making sure it was safe. One morning, as the sun rose over the dry, dusty land, the foreman decided it was time to test the dragon. He had been watching it carefully, and he could see that it was finally ready for more. It was no longer the fragile creature it had been when he first found it. It was healing, becoming stronger. But the foreman knew that true recovery meant more than just eating and resting. The dragon had to regain its strength completely. He stood up from where he had been sitting and called out to the dragon. "Come on," he said, his voice firm but encouraging. "Let's see what you can do." The dragon looked at him, its large golden eyes filled with curiosity. It had learned to trust this human, to believe that he wasn't going to leave it behind. But now, the foreman was asking it to do more than it had ever done since it arrived on this barren planet. The dragon's wings twitched, and it hesitated for a moment. The foreman didn't push. He simply walked a few steps away, turning to face the dragon. "You've been resting long enough. Now show me what you've got." Slowly, the dragon pushed itself to its feet. Its legs were still stiff, but it moved with more confidence now. It stretched its wings, the muscles still sore but responding. The dragon's body was stronger, its movements less shaky. But it still had a long way to go. The foreman watched closely, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the dragon's movements. He could see it was trying its best, but its wings were still heavy. The dragon tried to flap them, but the effort was too much. It stumbled and almost fell, but caught itself just in time. The foreman moved forward quickly, ready to help. But the dragon shook its head and steadied itself. "I'm okay," the dragon's body language seemed to say. It wasn't ready to give up just yet. The foreman gave a small nod, impressed by the dragon's determination. "Good. Keep going." The dragon took a few more steps, this time testing its legs. They were stronger now, though still a little shaky. It walked slowly at first, then began to pick up speed. Its steps were heavier, but each one was a little more confident than the last. The dragon's heart raced, not from fear, but from the excitement of moving freely again. The foreman stayed close, watching carefully. He didn't want to push the dragon too hard, but he also knew it needed to know how to defend itself, how to fly again. It had to be ready for what was out there. The planet wasn't a safe place, and the foreman had already seen signs of danger. Strange creatures, shadows moving in the distance. He couldn't let the dragon stay weak. It needed to be strong enough to protect itself. After a few more minutes, the dragon stopped. It was breathing heavily, its body trembling slightly, but its wings twitched again. It wanted to fly. The foreman could see the yearning in its eyes. He smiled a little. "You're not quite there yet," he said. "But you will be." The dragon let out a low, frustrated growl, but it didn't give up. It closed its eyes for a moment, then tried again. This time, it pushed harder, flapping its wings with more force. The dragon managed to lift its front feet off the ground, hovering just a few inches before its wings gave out, and it crashed back down to the dusty earth. The foreman rushed to the dragon's side, but again, the dragon didn't seem to need a help. It pushed itself back up, determination shining in its eyes. It looked at the foreman and then back at the sky. It wasn't ready to fly yet, but it was close. The foreman could see that it had the strength. It just needed time. "Good try," the foreman said, giving the dragon a pat on its side. "We'll work on it every day." The dragon nodded, its body still trembling, but its spirit soaring. It had failed once, but it had not given up. That was the most important thing. The foreman smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. The dragon had a long journey ahead of it, but it wasn't alone anymore. As the sun set on the barren planet, the dragon lay down to rest. The foreman set up a small campfire, keeping watch over the creature that had become more than just an animal to him. It was a companion, a survivor, just like him. The dragon was far from fully healed, but it was on the right path. The foreman knew that together, they could face whatever challenges this harsh planet had in store for them. The dragon was learning to fly again, and maybe, just maybe, they could escape this desolate place one day. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The days had turned into weeks, and the bond between the dragon and the foreman had grown stronger with each passing moment. The dragon had made remarkable progress. It could now walk steadily, and its wings were no longer as weak. Though it could not fly yet, it was getting closer with every attempt. The foreman had been patient, guiding the dragon through each step, never rushing it. They had become a team, working together in this barren land. One morning, as the sun began to rise, the foreman prepared for the day's training session. He had already laid out some basic tasks for the dragon: stretching, walking, and testing its wings. He wanted to help it get stronger, but he also wanted to teach it how to protect itself. "Today, we're going to try something new," the foreman said, glancing over at the dragon as it lay in the shade of a large cracked rock. The dragon raised its head at the sound of his voice, its golden eyes watching him intently. The foreman smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. He was starting to understand the dragon's behavior. It was intelligent, far more than he had expected, and the trust they had built was stronger than ever. The dragon had stopped being the fearful, weak creature it once was. It had become more alert, more aware of its surroundings. "Ready?" the foreman asked, raising an eyebrow. The dragon stood up slowly, stretching its wings. Its movements were more fluid now, but it still looked a little unsure. The foreman didn't blame it. It had a long way to go, but this day he had something different in mind. They had been training in the open, on flat ground, but today the foreman led the dragon to a rocky hill. The terrain was much more difficult, with loose stones and sharp edges. The dragon hesitated for a moment, looking up at the steep incline. "Phew." Foreman turned to face the creature, his expression serious. "I want you to climb this hill. Take your time, but don't stop." The dragon looked at the hill, then back at the foreman. It was clearly unsure. It had been training on flat ground where movement was easier. The steep rocks posed a much greater challenge. But the foreman wasn't asking it to do something impossible. He was asking it to push its limits, to become stronger. With a deep breath, the dragon took its first step. The rocky ground was unstable beneath its feet, and it stumbled slightly, its claws scraping against the stones. But it didn't fall. It steadied itself and took another step. The foreman stood back, watching quietly. "You've got this," he said softly, more to himself than to the dragon. "Keep going." The dragon didn't respond with words, but its actions spoke volumes. It took slow, deliberate steps, using its claws to grip the rocks as it carefully made its way up the hill. Its wings, still stiff but stronger than before, fluttered slightly for balance, though it did not attempt to fly. The climb was difficult, and the rocks were sharp, but the dragon did not give up. The foreman followed from a distance, keeping an eye on the dragon's progress. He could see how much it had changed, how much it had grown in strength and confidence. But today was a test. Could the dragon overcome its fear of failure? Could it push through the pain and reach the top? The dragon was panting, its muscles straining with each step. The hill seemed to grow steeper the higher it climbed. At one point it slipped, its claws scraping against the rough stone, but it quickly recovered. The dragon didn't make a sound, but the foreman could see the determination in its eyes. It wasn't just climbing to prove something to the human, it was climbing to prove something to itself. When the dragon finally reached the top, it stood, tall, its chest rising and falling with deep breaths. It had made it. The foreman approached, a proud smile spreading across his face. "Good job," he said, clapping his hands. "You did it." The dragon turned to face him, its eyes wide with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. It had made it to the top. It had faced a challenge and conquered it. For the first time since it had arrived on this planet, the dragon felt a sense of accomplishment. It had done something it once thought impossible, but the foreman wasn't done yet. He motioned to the horizon, where dark clouds were beginning to gather. A storm was coming, and he knew that this would be a good test of the dragon's endurance. "Stay with me," he said. "We need to get to shelter before the storm hits." The dragon looked out at the storm clouds, then back at the foreman. It was a sign that nature on this planet could change quickly. The foreman had been right. The dragon needed to be prepared for anything. The wind was starting to pick up, and the air felt heavy. Without a word, the dragon followed the foreman, carefully making its way down the steep hill. The rocks were now slick with moisture from the coming storm, but the dragon's movements were steady. It was no longer the trembling, uncertain creature it had been when the foreman first found it. It was strong. It was capable. As they reached the bottom of the hill, the first drops of rain began to fall, quickly turning into a heavy downpour. The wind howled, and the air crackled with energy. The foreman turned to the dragon, a satisfied expression on his face. "You're ready for this," he said, voice firm. "You've come a long way." The dragon looked at him, its golden eyes filled with something new, a sense of purpose. It had survived so much, and now it was ready for whatever came next. The storm was just another challenge, another step in the journey, and together they would face it. The storm raged for hours, a loud, terrifying force of nature. The wind howled like a wild animal, and the rain fell in sheets, drenching everything in its path. The foreman and the dragon had taken shelter in a small cave near the base of the hill. The cave was dark and cold, but it was safe from the worst of the storm. The dragon lay in the back of the cave, its wings folded tightly against its body, trying to stay warm. The foreman sat near the entrance, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. The storm had come out of nowhere. One moment, the sky had been clear, and the next, it was filled with dark clouds, twisting in ways that didn't look natural. He had seen storms like this before on other planets, but this one felt different. It felt wrong. He glanced back at the dragon. The creature had come a long way in such a short time. Its body was stronger now, its wings had more control, and its movements were more graceful. The dragon was no longer the weak, malnourished creature that had first stumbled into his camp. But now, it would face a new challenge, one that would test not only its strength but its instincts. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, a low rumble shaking the cave. The foreman's heart skipped a beat. He stood up, his hand instinctively reaching for the small weapon he had carried with him. The dragon's ears perked up, its golden eyes flashing with alarm. The foreman stepped cautiously toward the entrance, peering out into the storm. The wind had picked up again, and he could barely see beyond a few feet in front of him. But there was something else, a faint sound, like the low growl of an animal, echoed through the wind. The dragon's eyes widened, and it stood up, its body tense. It could feel it too. Something was out there, something dangerous. The foreman squinted into the storm, his hand gripping his weapon tighter. It wasn't the wind that had made the ground shake. No, it was something larger, something stronger. Then, the shadows shifted. At first, it was just a movement, a large shape moving across the horizon. But as the figure came closer, the foreman could see it more clearly. It was massive. Its body was covered in thick, dark scales, and its eyes glowed with a menacing red hue. The creature was at least twice the size of the dragon. Its claws scraped against the ground as it walked, leaving deep grooves in the earth. Its breathing was heavy, and the foreman could hear its growls above the howling wind. The dragon let out a low growl of its own, its body instinctively stepping in front of the foreman. It had never seen anything like this before. This creature was larger, more powerful, its predator. The foreman's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the creature draw nearer. "This is it," the foreman muttered under his breath. "This is the test." The dragon stepped forward, its wings twitching, preparing itself for the battle it had never asked for. The foreman knew that there was no turning back now. This creature was a threat, and the dragon would need to fight if it wanted to survive. The massive creature snarled, its eyes locked on the dragon. It was as if the storm had brought it to this very place, to face the weakened dragon and claim its dominance. The foreman didn't know what this creature was, but he didn't care. He had to trust the dragon now. The bond between them had grown strong enough. The dragon had learned so much in such a short time. It was no longer the weak, frightened creature it had once been. The dragon took a deep breath, its muscles tightening as it crouched, preparing to launch itself into the air. The foreman's heart raced as he watched the dragon's every movement. The storm roared around them, but in that moment, everything was silent. The air was thick with tension. Without warning, the creature lunged. It was faster than the foreman had expected. The dragon had only a split second to react. It flapped its wings and shot into the air, narrowly avoiding the creature's massive claws. The foreman's eyes widened in awe. The dragon was flying. It had done it. It was finally able to take flight just when it mattered most. The battle was fierce. The creature roared and snapped at the dragon, its claws reaching for the flying beast. The dragon darted through the air, its wings cutting through the storm. It wasn't as fast as the creature, but it was more agile. The dragon swerved and dived, using the terrain to its advantage, staying just out of reach of the creature's deadly claws. The foreman ran toward the battle, his weapon drawn, ready to defend the dragon if it needed help. But the dragon didn't need him. It was holding its own. The foreman watched in amazement as the dragon dipped and swerved, avoiding each attack with skill and precision. For a moment, it seemed like the creature might overpower the dragon, its massive claws slashing through the air. But the dragon had learned. It knew how to fight, how to dodge, how to survive. Then, in a bold move, the dragon lunged at the creature, its teeth sinking into the creature's side. The massive beast roared in pain, but the dragon didn't let go. It twisted its body, pulling the creature down with all its strength. The two creatures crashed to the ground with a violent thud. The foreman stood frozen, watching the dragon fight for its life, for its freedom. The battle raged on, the storm swirling around them. But the foreman knew one thing for certain. The dragon had finally become the fighter it was meant to be.